Hello, and welcome to another episode of Across the Dinerverse, searching for the heart and soul of America, one diner at a time. I'm your host, John Murphy. It's great to be here. The whole point of the show is I travel all across the country. I go to diners, I sit down, put up my microphone, I invite people to come over, I ask them questions, they answer, I listen, and I don't judge. Just trying to get to the heart of what they think. You know, how do they feel about the country, about their families, about their lives? And we get some great stories. Thank you for supporting us. Patreon.com/Dinerverse. That's Patreon.com/Dinerverse. Become a patron, sign up, get some extra bonus content, some good stuff. For $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month. Hell, you want to pay me $100 a month? I don't care. I'll personally call you. In fact, I'll come to your house to do the show or your diner to do the show. So this week we're in Palm Bay, Florida, on the Atlantic side of the great state of Florida. Although I think a lot of people don't think Florida is such a great state. And we'll get into that, hopefully, with some of the patrons that we talk to. So the diner that I chose is called Dotties, D-O-T-T-I-E-S, Dotties Diner. And I cold called him and talked to the manager named Erik Minton. Sounded kind of young on the phone, but when I showed up and met him, he looked like a teenager right out of high school. And by the way, when we recorded this podcast, it was literally 3 days before Hurricane Ian decimated the west coast of the state, the Gulf side. Some very interesting characters, some great stories. But first of all, let's find out a little bit more about Dottie's Diner in Palm Bay, Florida. Who is Dottie?
That would be my grandma, yeah. All the way back in 1987, my grandma and my grandpa opened the place. She actually put up some of her jewelry to get the money to kind of start this dream of theirs, and so he named it after her.
Why was this always a dream of theirs?
My grandpa actually grew up working in the food industry, and he was a manager of a different restaurant chain, and he kind of wanted to do his own thing, you know, take full charge of his own business, and so it's kind of just something they started up together.
How do you like being a manager at Dottie's?
Well, I like it. Yeah, it's fun. I like working with my family. You know, we, a lot of the people who have been working here, even outside the family, we've had a lot of the same staff for a long time, so I've come to really know everybody really well.
That says a lot because most families don't get along very well when they're involved in a business together. Do you guys fight?
Well, I mean, maybe in this degree that most families do, but I'd say overall we get along really well, and especially here at work, we work really well together.
How old are you?
I'm 27 years old.
Do you think you're going to stay here the rest of your life?
I think so, yeah. I mean, my grandparents, you know, gave it to my dad. At this point, he's kind of 1 foot towards the door of retirement, I would say, so, you know, I'm kind of next in line.
Tell me about Palm Bay, Florida. You're near Melbourne.
You know, those two cities are almost kind of intertwined in a lot of ways. You know, we're a few minutes away from the river. We have a lot of very strong, you know, beach vibe.
What's it like growing up here?
It's nice. Definitely, like I said, we go to the beach a lot. You know, that's definitely one of the top destinations when you're on this, you know, the east coast of Florida anywhere. You're going to want to go to the beach. It's definitely growing a lot. You have a lot of tech booming in this area.
What does Palm Bay and Melbourne, Florida think of Ron DeSantis, the governor?
Overall, pretty supportive.
Would you say Palm Bay is more red or blue?
Probably more red.
There's a degree of people who live in the northern states who think Florida should be cut off and set off into the Atlantic. Why is that?
I don't know. I mean, to me, it's a paradise. You have, you know, the theme park capital of the world less than an hour from here.
In Orlando.
In Orlando, correct. Yeah, I mean, you got to remember Florida is pretty massive. And you have really inland Florida and you have the coastal Florida, and it's almost like two different animals. So over here on the coast, I'm pretty happy with it.
What do they call this coast? Because I know the entire coastline of Florida has different names. What area is this?
Most of the time it's referred to as the Space Coast.
Cape Canaveral is not too far from here. Do you have rocket scientists in here at Dottie's?
Yeah.
You've seen them?
We have all kinds of cool people who come in here. You know, definitely I would say our lunch crowd has a pretty strong group of people who, you know, get out of work, come here to eat, and then go back to whatever lab or building they're working at. So even our area code is actually 321 to represent a countdown of a rocket going off.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's always been really cool to me.
What's the best thing on the menu here at Dottie's? What is the big crowd favorite?
Easily, probably our most popular item is going to be the biscuits and gravy. You know, we make fresh from scratch biscuits. Our gravy's fresh from scratch, and it's so versatile. You can put eggs on it. You can put different meats on it. You can put hot sauce on it. You can put anything you want on it. So it's like a really great template, and you just customize it however you like, and it's really popular here.
What is stolen the most by the customers?
Spoons.
Spoons?
Yeah, the amount of silverware I have to repurchase on a regular basis is incredible, and it's a mystery. It's a mystery where it goes. Nobody wants to fess up to where it goes.
So just spoons, not forks, not knives, but spoons.
Yeah, it's weird. For every one pack of forks and knives that I purchase, I'm buying like 4 or 5 packs of spoons. It's incredible.
There is a spoon caper going on in Palm Bay, Florida.
Coming in here fairly regularly, yes.
Well, thank you very much for letting us come down here to Dottie's. Really
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. It looks like a wonderful place.
I appreciate it.
And what should I order? Oh, you know what? I'm not a big biscuits and gravy kind of guy. I'm more of an egg omelet guy. What's the best egg dish?
Do you like potatoes, like home fries, hash browns?
I got to be honest. I live in California, and carbs are illegal.
Oh, okay.
Can't eat carbs in California.
You know, my favorite omelet is the lumberjack. It's green peppers, onions, smoked sausage, cheddar cheese. You can get it egg white.
Nice.
That's one of my favorites, big time.
I'm going to have to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Eric, nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you,
Thank you for letting us bring the podcast here.
Absolutely.
You are part of the Dinerverse.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Really nice kid. Really smart. Family business. I love it. So as I mentioned on the last podcast, a little odd just walking up to people and saying, hey, you don't know who I am? You've never heard of this podcast? It's new, but I want you to be on it. Come over to my table and talk to me. There were a couple of guys who were eyeing me. They were like Mutt and Jeff. One was tall and thin, the other was short and wide. You know, as I was setting up my gear and everything, they were kind of giving me the stink eye. You know how people give you the stink eye? They just don't like you right off the bat. They're suspicious of you. So I thought I'd try and break the ice and go over and talk to these guys, invite them to come onto the show. And, well, they did. What is your name?
Kyle.
Hi, Kyle. And what is your friend's name?
Robert.
Hi, Robert. You guys were like looking at me weird when I asked you to come over here and sit down and talk on the podcast. You have suspicion about me. Why is that?
Well, there might be a couple of reasons to that. One, you have all this equipment on the table. I don't know if you're with like the FBI or something.
No.
And then we have a somewhat unusual business that we try to keep somewhat a low profile on. So
you guys work together?
Yes, we do.
What do you do?
Well, interestingly enough, for lack of a better word, I guess you'd say we're treasure hunters.
Really?
Yeah.
You have a business where you hunt for treasure.
Yes. We'd like to turn that into a business where we find treasure.
So you haven't found any treasure yet?
Not yet.
So they do call this area where we are, Melbourne, they do call it like the Treasure Coast, correct?
The Treasure Coast was a stretch of Florida coastline from Fort Pierce Inlet up to Sebastian Inlet, which is about 35 miles in length. And it's where the Spanish 1715 shipwrecks were lost in that year, 1715.
So one shipwreck?
Well, that's an interesting question. Some people say 10, 12. It's still really unknown how many ships were in the convoy and exactly how many were wrecked.
Now, how do you know all this?
I'm an archaeologist, so what I do is we study history through the recovery and identification of artifact material. And that helps us say that this wreck was found here, and this is what that shipwreck may be if we have something called a diagnostic artifact.
What level of an archaeologist are you?
I've been doing archaeology for about 30 years. I've got a doctorate in archaeology. I've been accepted by the state of Florida as an archaeologist, so I've worked on many projects in Florida, including most recently with Kyle here.
Kyle, how many wrecks do you think are off the coast of Florida here in this Treasure Coast area?
I fully believe there's well over 1,000 wrecks off our coastline. Some of the wrecks are near the beach. Other wrecks could be several miles out. But just an interesting little point, between 1502 and 1524, there was over 125 wrecks just around the Dominican Republic. So in a very short period of time, you had 125 wrecks just in one small area. There are well over 1,000 wrecks up and down our coastline because simply that was their ride home, was going up the Gulf Stream from Havana, mostly to Seville, Spain. And the Gulf Stream allowed them to sail easily rather than trying to fight the Gulf Stream. So they all sailed north. They didn't have the Weather Channel. And the next thing you know, they go, guys, skies are getting a little dark here, you know. And it got really rough, and these hurricanes would hit, storms would hit, and sometimes entire fleets would be sunk at one time. And it was a very dangerous process to do what they did back in the day.
Can anybody be a treasure hunter?
Well, if you got enough money and enough tenacity, yeah, you could do it. But the problem has been in the treasure hunting business, these shipwrecks, when they would wreck, over time the woodworms would eat the wood, and the wreck would disintegrate over time, and the heavier items would sink into the sand. The nails that held the ship together would sink into the sand, the cleats and pulleys, but also the treasure. And so nowadays, if you were to go to the spot where it wrecked, you would only see sand, and you would not see the wreck. And the only equipment that's available to find something like that in the past has been a cesium vapor magnetometer.
A what?
But yeah, right.
A what?
We abbreviate it to a mag.
A mag,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but what it does is it picks up an electronic signature from a magnetic wave of the Earth's signature. It'll see iron, but it won't see gold and silver. And that's the problem from the treasure hunters, because they don't know where it is, and the ocean is huge.
What we're talking about here is the signature of a shipwreck, and that's found through magnetometry, cannons, anchors,
Right.
iron fittings, and things like that. So that's really where treasure hunters have started in the past, is find those signatures, and in association with those signatures has been treasure, because that's the cargo many times.
That sounds like that's a big roll of the dice. You find iron or signatures, as you say, with this whatever the hell it's called, magnetometer, and you say, okay, there's some kind of ship down here because there's lead that we can detect. But how do you know if there's gold, silver, anything else down there?
That's an interesting question. The next step, once you find the signature, is you've got to do diver verification. So you put the divers in the water, and they dive on the site, and they will see oftentimes the cannons, anchors, and if they don't, what they've done in the past, they've used something called prop wash deflection, which is to blow the sand off the site, and that's generally how treasure has been found.
You say you have not found any treasure yet. How long have you been doing this, Kyle?
Well, it's a little bit embarrassing. I sort of hate to answer that one, but it's been over 15 years now.
You haven't found a coin, not a dime, basically.
Yeah, I have not found a dime.
How much have you spent?
About $22 million, but who's counting?
How do you get $22 million to do this for 15 years and show no results? Why do people, are you a fraudster? What the hell?
Well, it's a challenge, and the point is, though, that my family and myself, we put in a bulk load of the financing over the last 15 years, and it just so happens there are some good friends that have helped put in additional dollars, and they realize that if we find some treasure, that they could experience a massive return on their money.
If you do find treasure, how much is it worth?
We're a company that's actually a public company, and so we're audited, and we will carry the treasure at a liquidation value, which is the lowest value that it will carry. In other words, a coin, silver coin may be worth an ounce of silver, might be $18, $20, whatever the price of silver is an ounce. However, the numismatic value of that same coin might be $20,000.
For one coin?
Yeah, depending on the rarity of the coin and the shape the coin is in, absolutely.
Can't anybody be a treasure hunter? I mean, can I go out there myself with a dive tank and start searching these sites if I think there's something there and start looking for it?
You could, but you'd be operating illegally. And
why is that?
There's laws on it that have been created by some cases the state of Florida and in some cases nationally, but there are laws that say if it's on the beach and you find it on the beach, it's yours. But if it's out in the water, it belongs to the state of Florida if it's within 3 miles of our coastline.
How far are these wrecks, do you think, are off the coastline?
Well, this is interesting. Kyle says something about deep water wrecks, which could be in the Gulf Stream, on the edge of the Gulf Stream, or west along the coastline. And this is interesting. The 1715 shipwrecks were first found by a retired person taking a surfboard out in the water and seeing anchors lying close to shore and cannons. And this is true with most of the shipwrecks. They were known sites, but nobody did anything until someone put it together financially and went out there and verified that this was a shipwreck, and then the project started.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this whole concept of a business and dedicating your life to it. I mean, 15 years, $22 million. That's mind-blowing to me, and you haven't found a single coin yet?
Unfortunately, that's correct. We know what the biggest problem is. The biggest problem is you can't see under the sand and see gold, silver, emeralds, etc. So what we have done is we've spent millions of dollars developing equipment that can actually do that. And that is going to be unique. And we just completed our first operating unit, and we're just beginning to use it. But the advantage of this unit is that it can see under the sand. It can give us a 3D picture of what's down there. But more importantly, it can discriminate between the metals. So it can tell us whether something's lead or copper or iron or stainless steel or gold or silver. And so now all we have to do is put this device, it's autonomous, swims under the water, and all we have to do is put it on top of a site that has gold or silver, and it will find it, and it will tell us how many inches under the sand it is, how many feet, how large it is, and exactly where it is. And that's going to change things for me.
What would be the total take if you found something big on this ship out here on the coast?
Well, of course, the total take is dependent upon what the ship actually carried. And to give you some perspective, which in the beginning I didn't realize the scope, we have, there was a ship found off the coast of Cartagena that the value of that ship, the San Jose, has been estimated between 19 and $21 billion. That's billion with a B, as in boy, yes. And so the size of these wrecks are tremendous. You know, a lot of these wrecks, these ships were big ships that came to get this. They're cargo ships. Sometimes they call them Spanish galleons if they're dressed up a little bit. But the bottom line is they carried tonnage. And when you look at tonnage of anything, gold, silver, emeralds, you're talking some substantial numbers. So your take could be in the billions of dollars, which is why I've done this for 15 years and still have not given up.
Are you saying that there's billions of dollars of treasure off this treasure coast here in Florida?
No, I'm saying there's hundreds of billions of dollars. Yeah, not a billion, a few billion, 10 billion, 100 billion, hundreds of billions.
When you talk about that much money, people are going to get nasty. The state of Florida is going to get nasty. The country of origin of these ships is going to get nasty. They're going to want their piece because, you know, it's a mafia world and you got to give a little taste to everybody. How do you even go about trying to figure that out?
That in itself is a bit of a challenge. We've put a lot of thought into that. We've tried to make alliances with Spain, with France, with England. We've traveled there. We utilize their archives for research. We try to build relationships there, even in Havana, Cuba. And so we're trying to work within that community, if you want to call it that. It's the world. But to share and share with them. And so we're not so greedy as to say, hey, we're not going to work with people. We will work with people. But we also have present law. For instance, there was a treasure group 40 years ago, roughly, that found a pretty fair amount of treasure, and Spain tried to claim that treasure. They took it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that they abandoned those wrecks and allowed the salver to keep that treasure. And so we have precedents in law. Now, that law only goes out 3 miles, which is the 3 miles from the low water mark on the beach, which is Florida lands. And so once you get out past 3 miles, the law changes. And it's sort of a finder's keepers, with the exception if you find a warship. If you find a warship, you got to give it back in its entirety to the country of origin.
Bob, can I call you doctor? Are you a doctor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Dr. Bob. What do you think of this crazy harebrained idea this guy is doing? I know, and obviously you're friends, you work together, but 15 years, $22 million, not a single coin. Is he absolutely batshit crazy?
No, other treasure hunters, very successful treasure hunters, have looked for longer. Mel Fisher, everybody's heard of him. He was called the world's greatest treasure hunter. He found the Atocha and the Santa Margarita in the Florida Keys. He also worked on the 1715 fleet. He was successful, but he had to put a lot of time and money into it.
What he just said about the number of wrecks, the value, hundreds of billions of dollars, do you think that's accurate here just off the coast of Florida, 3 miles?
If you look at the New Bahama Channel, which is the Gulf Stream, and all the shipwrecks that have been lost there, it could easily reach into the billions. I agree with that. Archaeologists tend not to get involved in how much the shipwreck is worth. They get involved in what are the artifacts and what do the artifacts mean.
Do you believe in this guy, this Kyle guy sitting right here?
Mr. Kennedy's put a lot of time, effort, and money into it, and with his new partnerships here in Palm Bay with the Sea Searcher, Discriminator, he is going to find treasure in the very near future.
How do you beat the competition of these wrecks? Obviously, there's got to be other companies, other treasure hunters like you trying to go after this mother lode out there. How do you beat them?
He is the only private treasure hunter in business now in the state of Florida. And you've got to go and you've got to get an admiralty arrest. You've got to work with the state. And that's what protects you from interlopers.
Do you have to get a permit for this?
Yes. And in fact, just getting the permit is pretty difficult because the state of Florida, I'm actually the only person or company in the last roughly 40 years to receive a recovery permit from the state of Florida. And so in 40 years in the United States, I'm it.
Do you know Ron DeSantis personally? You just call him on the phone and say, Ronnie, I need a permit? How does that work?
That's a good question. I do wish I knew him personally. I almost met him one night at a dinner party, and certainly wish I would have. I do know personally the Secretary of State, but in reality, the reason I have the very first recovery permit in such a long time was because the state simply defrauded me on multiple fronts and defrauded my company. And before going to court, they settled with me, and my recovery permit was part of that settlement.
Do you have exclusivity on these wrecks off the coast of Florida here in this treasure coast?
I do. However, that exclusivity is limited. The state has a clause that basically says if any other entity finds a wreck and they deem that entity capable of recovering that wreck, that they reserve the right to give that wreck to that entity if I have not already claimed that wreck. And the word claim is an important word because if I claim a wreck, I have to work that wreck, and it'll cost me at least $500,000 a year to work the wreck. So currently, I've really only claimed 2 wrecks.
If you don't find a damn thing, your life will be a wreck, won't it?
It's already been a nightmare. Yeah, but I'm going to wake up from this nightmare, and it's going to be really, really good, and I will have forgotten all about it.
Are you married?
Yes.
What does your wife say about this harebrained idea about treasure hunting and $22 million in 15 years?
You know, I'm lucky I'm still married, actually, because we've been on one heck of a roller coaster ride where I had a very successful broker-dealer dealing in stocks and bonds, and I specialized in taking companies public. And we went from making all kinds of really good money to basically making nothing, because I put money into this company for 12 years straight, taking no money out of it whatsoever. And it's put a real burden, certainly on my wife and also my kids. But they've all been exceptionally supportive. They realize there's a vision here. We're a company that has the potential to now find things that nobody else in the world has ever been able to find. Nobody else in the world has ever been able to create this type of technology. And when the world sees the success that we generate from this, I'm sure there'll be other scientists that come to the table and actually figure out other ways potentially to do this. But right now, what we've invented, we're keeping secret, and we're going to utilize it. And there's so much treasure out there that potentially in the future, I think I can rival Walmart. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's certainly my vision.
Let me say something about that. This is very simple and straightforward. It's been conjectured by experts that if you took all the currencies of the world today, rubles and pounds and francs and dollars, escudos, and you gathered all that, there's more lost underwater than the sum total of all the currencies in the world. That's not my idea. That's a generally accepted idea of what's been lost underwater around the world. I think that's very interesting. There's something called a paradigm shift. This will be a paradigm shift in treasure hunting, believe me.
You say you have shareholders and you're a public company. How many shareholders do you have?
We have over 5,000 shareholders literally around the world, and we actually have a who's who in our shareholder list. You would be shocked at some of the names if you found out who these people were that are investors in my company.
Politicians?
We've got politicians, attorneys. In fact, Prince Albert of Monaco is one of our shareholders.
I'm sitting here at Dottie's Diner in Palm Bay, Florida, talking to some treasure hunters. I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't even know that was like a job you could do. But apparently you are attempting to do it after all these years and all that investment.
But you came to the right spot. One, Dottie's is awesome. And I got to tell you, if you leave here and you're hungry, it's your own fault, okay? Yeah, they got a heck of a breakfast. I really got to compliment them on that. But the other thing is, you're here in the Treasure Coast. And our company Seafarer is extending that Treasure Coast further north than what it has been before. Because at our edge where we are, the Space Coast kicks into gear. And so we're actually extending into some of the Space Coast now.
How did you develop this technology?
Well, I think there was some divine guidance here because, there are more PhDs here per capita than anywhere else in the country. And it's because of NASA and Cape Canaveral and the Space Coast. You have every major defense contractor in the country that has not only offices here, but multiple buildings in some cases, depending on the company. And so you got all these PhDs working for them, and these are brilliant people, some of the best minds in the country. And we had the good fortune of meeting one of those scientists that specialized in geolocation. And everything he knows is so far above my head, I can't even get started.
What's his name?
Tim Reynolds. The gentleman's name is Tim Reynolds, and he's absolutely brilliant. And he's been able to go from a blank sheet of paper to a device that's so sophisticated technically, as well as just simply with the software, not including the hardware. The hardware designs that he created were amazing. The approach using all kinds of different applications, from beams to sonar to all kinds of stuff. It was just incredible that he could create something like that from a sheet of paper. But he personally has been able to draw in every particular scientist that we needed because of his tenure in this business and with the Space Coast.
Well, I wish you luck. I hope it doesn't take another 15 years. I hope you don't have to spend another $22 million to try and find one frickin' coin out there. But I wish you luck. Are you a native Floridian?
No, I actually grew up in right on the outskirts of Little Rock, Arkansas. And
Wait, you know the Clintons?
I do. I do.
You do?
I actually had dinner with Bill Clinton twice. While he was governor, not while he was president.
And how many women were there?
There's quite a bit. That was an interesting story. He had a white limo, and on the back of the white limo it said Gov, G-O-V, right? and so when you pulled up, you knew if he was at the restaurant, right? And in Little Rock, you got so many restaurants that are really nice restaurants. So you run into people there that you see at the other restaurants, right? Well, when you pull in the parking lot, you saw that stretch limo that said Gov. You knew that he was there, right? So you go inside. He normally had a corner table. He normally had 2 state troopers to keep people from coming up to him and, talking to him, et cetera, right? And the interesting thing was there seemed to always be females there or singular, not plural. But I never did see Hillary, however.
Governor's got to do what a governor's got to do.
And matter of fact, he had just received a $1,000 donation from me out of my paycheck to support his gubernatorial campaign, which I was not for. And so I wanted my $1,000 back. and it just so happened that I was the top producing broker at my firm, and part of my reward for being top producing broker was having dinner with the governor, with the owner of my firm. And so I told the owner of my firm, I said, hey, look, when I meet this guy, I'm getting my $1,000 back. And he says, no, you're not going to open your mouth. I said, yeah, I am, too. I'm going to get my money back. So I was determined to do that. Well, when I met the guy, we came around the corner of the building the restaurant was in. At the same time, he came around the other corner. And from all the way across this big atrium inside this building we're inside of, he hollers my name, and he goes, Kyle Kennedy. Everybody in that atrium stopped because it was the governor, and he was hollering somebody's name, right? He came up, gave me a big bear hug. I came up under his chin. The guy's tall, okay? I'm short, right? And so he gives me this bear hug, puts me under his arm, and he goes, Kyle, I've heard so much about you. And he starts regurgitating my background, my football, everything. And I was so shocked and stunned. And then he was so funny during dinner that by the end of dinner, I'd never asked for a dime back.
That's an amazing story. Let me ask you this. What do you think of Bill Clinton today and his legacy as president of the United States?
You know what? Where there's certain things in policies and things that, I don't agree with, there's nobody you're going to agree with 100%, I guess. But I have a lot of respect for the man. The man was actually brilliant. And again, I may disagree with certain taxations and things like that. I do have to say the guy was brilliant.
What do you think about the allegations that he was with Jeffrey Epstein on the jet down there?
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. These high-ranking politicians, they have tremendous power, and sometimes that power goes to their head. And you got to also look at these guys. They have tremendous drive, and because they got to fight all these politicians to get to where they are. And when you have tremendous drive like that, that drive extends into perhaps other areas where self-control would be wonderful, but they tend to get egos to go along with that drive, and that leads into temptation that is always available, and that's disappointing, but it's the way the world is.
Dr. Bob, tell us about your affairs.
No.
Well, I want to wish you guys the best of luck. Thank you for coming on this podcast, even though you weren't so sure about me in the beginning.
How did you get into this?
Well, I started in radio as a kid back in Nebraska, small town radio station. Went to college, did radio. It just happened for me. The doors opened up, the opportunities opened up, and I did that. And then after about 25 years, I started producing on television, writing and producing on TV. And now I'm coming back to my roots. Podcasts are kind of a thing, and I really believe that the voice of the American people is really not kind of being heard. And so that's why I'm doing this podcast across the Dinerverse, trying to get to the heart and soul of what America thinks.
That's fantastic. I wish you the best of luck on that journey because, I hear what you're saying and I believe what you're saying because we've been coming here for a long time, and you got local people here, and you hear their thoughts, and it's certainly not as what's necessarily expressed by big media. And so I think what you're doing is awesome.
What do you think about Florida? You're not from Florida. What do you think about Florida?
I think Florida is an awesome state. I love Arkansas because I grew up there in the seasons, and Florida is completely different than Arkansas. But I love Florida too. Here in Palm Bay, it's really laid back. It's a nice place to be. The traffic's not bad. You don't have bad taxes. We got wonderful leadership in the government here with DeSantis. Florida's fantastic, in my opinion.
Above the Georgia-Florida line, there's a lot of people who think Florida should be like detached and sent off into the Atlantic and be separate from the United States. What do you think about that?
That's an interesting concept. What I think of Florida, I'm actually a native of Florida. Florida is really one of the last frontiers, and I think you see that with treasure hunting and all these different groups of treasures out there that have been found and have not been found. So I think that's very, very interesting. And the frontier carries over to what DeSantis is trying to do in other people here in Florida. Look at the Space Coast. You're kind of stretching that paradigm, aren't you? So people are a little bit jealous, and they're moving into Florida by the thousands, which Floridians are not too keen on. I'm speaking for myself. I don't know what Mr. Kennedy thinks, but guess what? They want to come here. They want to come here from California. That's a long drive.
And New York.
And New York, for sure. So Florida is really very, very interesting, but the paradise can go sour if you don't treat it properly.
Look at California, in my opinion.
Right, and I'll comment on that too. Hey, if they want Florida to slide off, hey, I'm all for that. Because, if you got these guys up north that are in California, et cetera, that believe that we should take a 5-year-old boy and convert him to a girl, these people are just freaking sick in the mind, okay? There is something wrong with these people to take kids like this and want to change their thought pattern and even do it aggressively. Oh, Johnny, you ought to think about being a little girl. Okay, they need to be smacked right upside the head. That's what needs to happen to them.
You seem pretty passionate about that topic.
Well, yeah, I got kids, man. If I had somebody approaching my daughters and telling them they needed to be little boys, I'd knock the okay. Well, I won't go there.
Well, the family.
This is interesting. Children have parents, and it's up to the parents to get together and block things like this.
I interviewed a woman whose child identified as transgender, born as a girl, told her when she was 16, wanted to be a boy. And she talked about the challenge of just supporting that child, but not going the full breadth of it, Got counseling, they did some hormone therapy, but they didn't do the big full surgeries and things like that. And I gotta say, she was very beautiful in her eloquence in talking about just loving your child no matter what. So to your point, Kyle, I would push back. I don't know if people are forcing kids to be transgender. I don't know if they're indoctrinating them into be transgender. I think they're just trying to grapple with, is it a fad? Is it real? And I think that's what people are struggling with.
John, I would agree with what you're saying. And, it's a heartfelt thing, especially when it comes to your own son or daughter. And certainly I can feel the emotional things that are there. But I've seen video of teachers talking to elementary children in school saying, hey, you should think about, being the other sex and actually talking and encouraging these children to do things like that. And seeing it, on TV helps make it a little more realistic, if you will. And there's people that just look the other way. And I'm not one of those people that look the other way. I'll fight it head on.
But I think the key is to be able to sit down and have conversations that are hard, difficult, challenging, but when you sit across from one another, the way we are right now, the bridge to a reasonable understanding is much easier than just, firing off tweets and Facebook posts and, just counseling people left and right.
John, your insight on that is just beautiful. You're absolutely right. And whereas, I grew up sort of a fighter, and probably still am, the point being, as you said it correctly, when you can sit down and have a meaningful conversation, maybe you can come to a neutral area where, you have understanding. And when you throw in some compassion with
That's
that.
it, the compassion. The compassion is what's missing right now.
Right.
And I think America's a compassionate country.
I think they want to be. And you can see the passion, through the division that's been created over the last couple of years. You can for sure see the passion that's out there. But like you just mentioned, if we could add some compassion to that, I think that'd be a wonderful thing.
Kyle, Dr. Bob, nice meeting you guys here at Dottie's Restaurant in Palm Bay, Florida. I wish you much success in your treasure hunting endeavors. I hope you find billions and billions of dollars.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was awesome.
I recorded this podcast on a Sunday morning. And so the diner was full of people. The Sunday brunch, big families, big tables, lots of noise. There was one table off in the corner, a man and a woman kind of keeping to themselves. And she had this big sun hat on, and she looked elegant wearing it. And I could tell she had this personality. I mean, she was definitely carrying the conversation with this guy who I assume was her husband or boyfriend. And she was just driving the conversation, and he was sitting there nodding and nodding and nodding. And so I figured I got to talk to this lady and find out her story. First of all, I love the hat.
Oh, thanks.
Tell me about this hat. What is the hat?
Oh, I just collect hats. I have a couple of dozen.
Really?
I live in Florida. It's sunny, and it blocks the sun from your face.
Nice. What's your name?
Chrissy.
How long have you lived here in Palm Bay?
In Palm Bay, about 2 years.
How do you like it?
I love it.
What do you love about it?
I don't want to be insulting to the rest of the country, but there's more intelligent life here.
In the Space Coast.
Of course, in the Space Coast.
I understand there's more PhDs per capita in this region of the country than anywhere else.
I would tend to agree.
I learned that there's a Florida Institute of Technology here.
Yeah.
Rocket scientists.
Yeah.
All kinds of scientists. So
A lot of engineers.
You get this smile on your face. Do you like engineers?
I'm married to an electrical engineer.
Oh, you are. I see. So you have a thing for engineers.
Yes.
Is he good with the electricity around the house?
Of course. He's not afraid to touch anything. And when we go to estate sales and yard sales, if it's broken, he loves it. Because that means he gets to do something and fix it.
Are you retired?
Of course.
All right. So what did you do in your working life?
I was a truck driver.
I love it. I love that. What was your favorite state?
I would have to say Florida.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you from Florida originally?
No, Pennsylvania.
How many years did you drive a truck?
Gee, that's a good question. 8?
8 years. Long haul, short haul?
Over the road, obviously. I was in every single state except for Alaska and Hawaii.
Did you make good money?
Yeah.
What's it like for a female truck driver being on the road in these truck stops where it's mostly men? What kind of things did you have to deal with?
Respect. The male truck drivers respected the women. They opened the doors for me. They curtailed swearing. And if they did and looked up and saw that I was there, they apologized immediately.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
So you were able to change the tone of a room simply by being a woman walking into this male-dominated
World, yes.
world. Yeah. How did you get into truck driving?
My first husband. We had 3 kids, and we just wanted to do something different. We had homeschooled them. They graduated high school. They were still living at home, but they could take care of themselves.
Yeah.
And we left.
Before we sat down and had this conversation, one thing you asked me was you didn't want to talk about politics. And I'm very curious, what is it about politics that you're nervous about?
I don't like when people put people into a category. Oh, they're Republican. Oh, they're Democrat. That's like breaking apart. Oh, those are black people. Those are Asian people. Those are white people. And not all whatever type of person is the same. All Republicans are not flamboyant and, oh, look at me and look at my Ford. And not all Democrats are, look at my Honda.
I adore you already. This is fantastic. That's why I'm doing this podcast, for that very reason. I think we're better Americans than people realize. Now, you've been on the road, you've traveled the country. What do you think about America?
I think for the most part, prior to this generation, I think America's great.
When you starting when? So when do you feel that it started to kind of get off the rails a little bit?
Well, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people my age, when they have their children, they have cut back on discipline. They have cut back on education to their children. And with that comes a society of, what's in it for me? And now the only time when today's generation does anything, it's only for themselves. If we could just open up to other people, this would be a far better place to live.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm doing the podcast. Because, as you and I are sitting down talking to one another, we've never met.
No.
This is our very first conversation, and yet it's delightful. Having a little laugh. We're talking about some, tough things. But I think when America sits down and has conversations, and that's why I come to diners, because when you got comfort food and you're looking across the table, you can have discussions, I think, don't you?
Oh, yeah. But you did mention a word that a lot of people have an issue with.
And what's that?
Food.
Do you have a food issue?
Yeah, I do.
Do you really?
Yes. I used to weigh 375 pounds.
Oh, my.
So did my husband.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And I used to sit down by myself after my divorce and eat an entire large delivered pizza and a dessert and the breadsticks and two 2-liter bottles of soda at one sitting.
It was an emotional response to what you were feeling.
Right, but it was more than that.
Was it a
I
food
was addicted.
Yeah.
I was addicted to food.
Where did your food addiction start?
From my childhood.
And what caused that?
Just issues at home. Comfort.
So you didn't feel comfortable, so you were finding a way to be comfortable.
Right.
Through food.
Right.
I can relate to that. I was a very fat kid, and I was bullied.
Yep.
And not until a wrestling coach saw me in school being bullied by, his name is Keith, Keith P. I'll never forget that name. But this wrestling coach, who was also my 8th grade math teacher, pulled me aside. I'll never forget his name, Coach John Gilbert, God bless him, said, "Are you sick and tired of being pushed around?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "You're going to come out for wrestling." And I told him, "I don't know a thing about wrestling. I'm going to lose every match. I can't do it." And he goes, "I don't care if you lose every match. It's going to change your life." I got into wrestling. I lost every match, but I lost 35 pounds. And by the end of the season, I wasn't getting pinned. I only lost on points. That summer, I grew 4 inches, and I was a more healthy, leaner, taller, self-confident man, and that one guy pivoted my life.
Because you took your focus off of, oh, poor me, to, this is what I can do. Look
Right.
what I can do.
Yes. When you were truck driving, is that where you put on a lot of the weight?
No, I was fat even before that. It helped put it on because all I was doing was sitting and driving, drinking soda pop. I ended up smoking 5 packs a day.
Of cigarettes.
Of cigarettes. I don't smoke at all now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
So what one piece of advice would you give to somebody who may be listening to this podcast who has weight issues or body dysmorphia? What would you say to them about how to change and pivot?
I would have to say focus on the good, focus on being healthy, no matter what the cost. It is so well worth everything.
And you deserve to love yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you recommend people move here?
If they're intelligent, yes. if they like all four seasons, definitely not.
Chrissy, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I love the hat. Congratulations on the fabulous transformation, and you have a great life, all right?
Thank you. You too.
Well, there you go. That's another wrap of another episode of Across the Dinerverse. That's my dog saying goodbye. Thank you to Eric. Thank you, Dusty. You've already been on the show enough. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to the treasure hunters. Thank you to Chrissy. Thank you to Erik Minton and his entire staff here at Dottie's Diner in Palm Bay, Florida. Look them up. Check them out. Great breakfast. Great crew. Really appreciate their accommodation. By the way, if you want to support the show, please visit patreon.com/Dinerverse. That's patreon.com/Dinerverse. And, for $1, $2, a couple of bucks here and there, we can give you some exclusive content, behind-the-scenes photos, some, outtakes from the show. And we really thank you so much. And I thank you for your support of this brand new podcast. And I hope we get to keep going for a long, long time. So I'll see you next time in a diner somewhere across the Dinerverse.